I am Patrick Hershberger. A lot of my work falls under the name of bonus saves or go bonus saves. And I do, you probably, if you're around town, you've seen murals that I've done. I do a lot of illustration, and I'm working on a comic book right now. And so I've been doing murals since about 2011, 2012. And I've just gradually started from, I did some work with some graffiti and street art people, and kind of explored some techniques from there. And I've turned it into a business slash passion that I really enjoy, working with everybody from like the Arts Council to small businesses. So it's kind of been a range. Murals are an interesting thing. There's a lot of people that Mural is a brand, and their social media content kind of follows through with that. I feel that I have a particular style that I bring, but a lot of what the client's needs are follows through with what I design from there. So I can do anything from kind of nature work to something really client specific. I think a good example of that would be the Kalamazoo River Valley Trail, the boardwalk mural that's underneath the Rose Park Memorial. And that was a series of 15-foot panels that just talked about the river history, about the hazards in the river from all the contamination. And so it was kind of, I don't want to call it like info art, but you know, that was very specific to that project. I just got done doing a mural for a facility that works with like botanicals, and that was, you know, a lot of plants. So it just depends on the project and what people throw at me.
Very cool. By the way, since we are kind of doing this as a Zoom meeting here, I'm going to ask everybody if you could to keep your mics muted unless you have a question. If you have a question and you don't feel like unmuting your mic, you can always type it in the chat. Or if you just have comments, anything like that, please feel free to use the chat to ask questions or put comments out. So, Patrick, do you want me to go ahead and start the video now?
Yeah, so what we'll be watching is kind of a demo I did at the Washington Street Bridge over in Battle Creek. It is a place where I've gone for almost a decade now, and we hang out and practice, and people skate and do or use, you know, BMX or whatever. And it's just a safe place to practice and get your thoughts out in your brains or try new techniques. So I'll go through the video and kind of do a step-by-step on how I make murals.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Everybody just be patient with me here.
You're muted.
All right, so I'm going to click play here, Patrick. If there's any point you want me to stop, just let me know, okay?
So this is a wall I usually do once or twice a year, and it gets tagged over because it's the skate park. It happens. But normally I like to put a fresh coat of paint over that surface. And that gives just a solid premise to where I'm not seeing a lot of old work come through underneath that. So it gets a couple of coats, and then I'll do some sketching. The ladder I'm using is a telescopic 15-footer. I was just holding up a spray tip, and I'll go over that tip a little later. I'm doing some sky effect with some spray paint now. And then I'm going to go back in and do some fading techniques. So I'm going to basically fade that darker blue into the mid-range blue and kind of do a night sky. And then a little later, I'll throw some purple up there. And so it's just, and fading that into each other. So now I'm doing the sketch on the base. If anybody's been following my recent work, I've been doing a ton of Garfield type stuff. So this is a Garfield piece. This is kind of a take on a couple different old school Garfield comics that have him and a couple other characters surrounding a fence, and they are singing to the moon. So I've already sketched these critters, and I'm going in and I'm filling them. I'm doing it with spray paint right now, but I'm pretty versatile with both acrylic and spray paint. It just really depends on what I want to use for that. So I'm filling in Garfield with a brush. I use a lot of flat acrylic paint. There's some lettering that's going on up there. And then Arlene's getting filled in. And then you'll just see the fence kind of come into play here. A lot of my work has some really thick line work in it. And it's weird, this past year, growing up, I read a lot of Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield. And when I started revisiting some of that, it was kind of like a punch to the face, because I realized how much of an effect it had on not only my youth as an artist, but how I make line work now. So sometimes it takes a few decades to realize what your original kind of thought process came from. Sitting in the library reading Garfield books. So this is Retracting the Ladder. Those telescopic ladders fold up to about 3 feet and are about 30 or 40 pounds. And they're really handy. I have traveled with them across state lines in a few airplanes. So this is just kind of waiting for the sun to get right. It was around noonish, but the shadow was still kind of cutting in across the pillar. As you can see, the dog is not very fond of Garfield and Arlene howling at the moon, but they're fine with it. So yeah, that is a quick process. This mural probably took me, and always clean up. If you're out somewhere practicing, clean up your stuff. Don't leave it for somebody else. Get rid of your waste. This mural, it's probably about 12 feet tall by 5-ish feet wide. And it was about an hour and 15 minutes that we've watched over a hyperlapse. Murals, it really depends on how quick you can go with how many layers you have to do. I'm a layer heavy person. This is going to be a review of some of the work I've done. It was over in the Vine Neighborhood Association, over on their building by Vine and Westridge. That was a few years back now. Oh gosh, that was probably, is that like, I think it's about 5 or 6 years old now. And one of the first that the Arts Council helped me out with funding for that. I did a few different murals for that project. That was the largest one. That was, I called it the Hare Chicks. And this is a huge project. I have never done an alley before, Bates Alley. But we did it, and a ton of volunteers helped out with this. It took about 3 weeks to fill in. We did about 3 layers, well, almost 4 in some places. And it's still there today. It's still, it's fading a little bit in some places, but it gets a lot of traffic, and thankfully they're utilizing it with a lot of the bars and restaurants in that area to expand out for expanded seating. And these huge sidewalk or alley projects, they get a lot of different uses, and we wanted to make something that felt like Kalamazoo, and this was kind of like a river scene, an abstract river scene. I've done a lot of work with the Edison Neighborhood Association. I live in the Edison, and this is a Howard's Party Store mural that just happened this past year. Just actually had to redo it. I've never had a car crash into one of my murals, but this year somebody hit the wall and they had structural damage. So we had a little bit of redoing to do, but it's in tip-top shape now. This scene is actually from about 100 years ago, looking south on Portage Road from Portage and Washington. So um, Howard's itself is kind of in the mural. Like there's a, I want to say like a dark blue wagon, and if you look way down on the right hand side, there's where Howard's is. But this is a really fun piece. I wanted it to be really representative of the neighborhood, not only then but now, and the community members it represented, and it had a great interaction with just people that live and work in the space. This is a cool history piece. This is part of the Rose Park Memorial Kalamazoo River Valley Trail. It is the boardwalk that's underneath Michigan Ave, and this was one of the oldest serving World War II women that she served in World War II. She just recently died in the past few years. She was, I think, 104. But it was there was about 15-foot panels for each of these, and there was, I think, a series of 6 or so. It was a really long wall. Fun project. We actually used some anti-graffiti coating on this, and it has helped because this area of the trail gets a lot of water, just from how it raises or how it comes from behind the concrete. And it's actually it's held up for as much water abuse as it takes.
Patrick, when you say there was an anti-graffiti coating on it, is that did you put that on originally intending to keep other people from painting over it, or was that intended to help with the water problem specifically?
Both, really. So it has gotten tagged a little bit, and I did go through and clean it up. But it's like an aquatic. It's not a paint. It's like it's a 2-part emulsion, and it really helps. It really helped with the water so far as well. So it kind of 2 for 1. I will say, if you don't need to use anti-graffiti for a project, don't use it. It is such a hassle. It is not a fun thing to work with. So this is a part of the AWOL project down in Miami. I have this is our 2nd year in the past in 2019. This was from 2018. The first year I participated in it, and it's a group of artists who I met at another mural festival in Kansas City, and was invited to AWOL down in Miami during Art Basel. So it's early December. This was at an elementary school, and probably like 40 different artists did different murals. And the schools down there are kind of not kind of open air. So this is like giant courtyard and multi-level. And so this is on the lower level, and it was kind of a take on a Homer piece that I did with some of my characters. And at the time I was doing my Skull Bunny, Spaceman Frank, and his unicorn friend, Buck. And so I put him in the ship as they were, sailing around somewhere near Miami.
I have to say the Spaceman Frank is one of my absolute favorite characters. That, like, whenever I see him around town, it's just like, yes, it's such a joyful feeling seeing that guy all over the place.
I miss Frank. I need to get back to him sooner or later, but he's still around. He's just kind of taking an extended vacation. So I've done a lot of work with One Mo Brewing. I currently am their art curator, so all the artists that we put up on the wall, I work with, and we represent a lot of fun local artists. And I've also gotten to paint a lot of murals in and around their facility. So their production facility, I've done 2 murals for, and then this is the newer part of the brewery over off of Portage that they call the Forest. And so I paint their windows every couple of years. And so it's just fun to see how the murals have evolved. This was, I really like this piece. I love doing kind of folksy wood scenes. I am a nerd D&D player at heart, so this kind of had that feeling for me. And it's a cool, with the lighting, it's really fun. The woodwork by Bad Ads, it all just came together. So this was the first piece I did with the Edison Neighborhood Association. It was Welcome to the Washington Square. And each letter is a different historical place, or just some place that either exists now or didn't or doesn't exist anymore. There was everything from the creamery in there to a barber shop. There's so much life around the Edison, and just close to Washington Square. It's just just a couple blocks, but there's a lot of things associated. There's a library branch there. The first letter for Washington Square is the library over there off the Portage. Such a fun piece. We had a focus group, or it helped with a focus group to kind of like see what buildings we really wanted to focus on. There's some art pieces that are no longer around that were public art. And they had to resurface the side of this building. So it was kind of one of the first large scaffolding pieces I got to work with, that thankfully the construction company left up, and I just utilized it to finish that mural. So this is probably one of the most high visibility pieces I've done locally. It's one of the main veins in the Kalamazoo off of Portage Road.
I think that's all of them. Yep. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So that was awesome. I love seeing all those pieces, especially the Washington Square ones are just so beautiful. Do you want to show us a little bit more of your workspace and how you do what you do?
So I am actually hanging out on the porch today because I'll talk a little bit about my workspaces. I have two main workspaces. One of those is inside, close to my living room and kitchen, and that is my Cintiq tablet and my computer. So I do a lot of illustration and comic work in my living quarters. I do have a studio in the house, slash library, slash a lot of other things. I have a lot of comics there, so it's a multi-purpose room. And I do a lot of work outside. So I figured I would demonstrate a few things and kind of show off some of the tools of the trade that I use. Is that all right? I will go ahead.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, cool. So one of the things when you're working with spray paint is to, unless you want to get your hands dirty, which I do all the time, wear gloves. Gloves help. If you've never worked with spray paint before but want to like play around with different tips, if you shop locally, you can get things like Rust-Oleum. And then there is this tip here. So this is the male tip. But a lot of tips that you buy are male tips. So you need an adapter. This is a male to female adapter you can buy on spray paint, like online. I buy a lot of stuff from Art Primo online. There we go. So you can turn something that is a high pressure can into something that's a little bit of more of a medium pressure, just with changing your tip. So I'll turn that over here. Normally, if I'm trying to get better lines, or I will do things like what they call cutting. So it's where instead of holding the can like this, you are angling it. So you're getting a solid line. That's not super solid because it's hitting my glove. Sorry about that. This would be if you were just spraying it and you're getting more of a softer gradient. There we go. That's a nice solid line. So typically I like to use a lot of medium pressure spray paint. There are a lot of stuff you should normally probably wear a mask or if you're outside. But this is something that is called iron lac sugar. So it is, it's a lot less toxic. It's not, the aerosol is fuming. It's still pretty, it's really decent to use for line, as far as line quality and the pressure. It's a little runny. It's not as quick drying as some of the other paints. The tip that I'm using for this is called a New York Fat. So it's something I use quite a bit. And then you can go from everything from, to, whereas a pink dot I use, and this is called Flame Blue. It's what I typically use. This goes, it lets a lot of paint out. So as you can see, you can get, let's go back to there. You can still do tiny stuff depending on how much pressure you apply to that, but you can go from everything from here to, you get a lot more, a larger line out of that. And a lot of times too, I'll use that when I'm fading. You can fade with anything really, like, so say we had this here, and I want it to fade in with that blue. So I would start to kind of almost angle my can away from the canvas, not directly at it, and then come back in. Now it's still wet, so it's going to drip a little bit. MTN 94 is another one that a ton of people use. It's a great paint. Another cool thing that you can do is you can get translucents. So translucents allow you to still, it's like adding shadow effects of things. So you can still see through. And the more you layer it, the darker it's going to get. So I like to keep my cans organized. Excuse me, I like to keep my tips organized. So I use an organizer. And this has, if you can see that there, there's a lot of my different tips and adapters. And I still use a lot of stock tips, but I really fall hard on, these ones are some of my favorites. They are called Lego Thins or Lego Skinnies. They are like a New York Fat, but a tinier dot. I'll illustrate it. So this is a typical New York Fat. Let's do it up here. I mean, you can even get down to that with a New York Fat. It's not easy. So same can spray paint. Sorry guys, I'm outside. I'm hearing some of the neighbors. You know, I totally fibbed on that. That was my Lego Thin. This is a New York Fat. So let's look at our line size there. It's a little thicker. You know, you can still get down if you need to, but let's do comparisons. This is a stock tip that comes on the flame. And you can, again, same technique, still get down. Let's look at it here. It's a little thicker. Yeah, it's probably about the same size as a New York Fat. So yeah, that is a few different techniques and tips, etc. that I use, and then I use probably it's just as much brush as I do spray. It just really depends. I don't think that there's one or the other that I have to use all the time. And if I have to do a lot of coverage with one color, I will brush it. You know, sometimes even with line work, a lot of times I prefer brush just because I feel like that line work signifies how I would typically do an illustration, and it just looks a little different than how I would spray things. So I'm not a purist by any means, shape, or form. So yeah, that's a few demonstrations.
Awesome. At this point, if anybody has any questions for Patrick, we definitely have time for questions. So feel free to either type them out in the chat or unmute yourself and ask away.
Okay, so I'm looking at what the question from Stacy. It says, what type of place do you find supplies for paints and tips? If you're trying to shop locally, I mean, you can literally get this stuff at Michael's or any other art store. I mean, like, but I typically, like, I'm an Art Primo guy, so Art Primo is a distribution hub out of the West Coast, and they sell a lot of things like flame products and like the Flame Blue or Molotov, which is also like Belton. It's the same people that make them. It's German made paint. And you know, most of my tips I buy bulk from them as well. Oh, sorry, you got my kitty in the background. He's doing his kitty thing. But I mean, if you look up spray tips, like just Google spray tips or whatever, I mean, like you will have Bombing Science and tons of other places just show up. I saw the question previous about art training. I am a college dropout, so I hit a bunch of my art through KVCC early on, and I actually was really into photography and just started working under a photographer, and then up and moved to Chicago to do photography with some people, and fell in with a bunch of street art and graffiti guys and girls, and just found my way back home to Kalamazoo, and I just kind of, you know, done that ever since. I haven't really done more than, you know, I've probably done 4-ish years of school, but I just, you know, I'll get around to finishing it someday. Too busy creating. I didn't see the last question that came through. I can look at the chat though.
There's one that says, what's your process for working out a design with a client?
So I look at myself as someone who just, if someone gives me an idea, I've got to figure out their idea, because a lot of times the way I see things is not how other people see them. But they came to me in the first place. They know a bit about how I create or what I create. And so they're at least comfortable with that. I'm not classically trained. I have always made art, but that does not necessarily mean it's going to turn out to look like a Michelangelo. I normally ask what the client is looking for, and then I will give them a rough sketch. And if I'd be like, look, do you love this? Do you hate this? Is there an element that you like, but 70% of it you don't? I am a firm believer in be ready to throw away your idea and come up with a new one. If the initial plan didn't work out, that's okay. It wasn't the right direction in the first place. You know, keep on finding new elements until you break through a wall with that client. And then once I hit that point, it's just fine tuning. I do a lot of, I mean, I would say 95% of what I do now is digital sketching. In my studio, I have a bookshelf full of sketchbooks, and I'm just tired of it. I now have everything digital just because I sketch a lot, you know. So, and it may not be like final creation stuff, but it's just a lot of paper So now I do digital sketches, and then with like, with walls, I'll just either have images of the space, and then I'll superimpose things to make sure the client's comfortable with what I'm proposing, and then we move forward from there.
And can you see this last question here? It says, what are the greatest challenges you encounter when working on a large scale project like the Washington Square mural?
So that's kind of multifaceted. The Washington Square mural was a lot of fun because, and it was also a challenge because it had to represent a lot of different aspects of the community. That's a mural that we talked to a lot of different people. We had a lot of different voices say what was important to them, and then we had to narrow those thoughts down in order to create something, that we were limited to so many different letters. But I feel that we effectively did that, and it took over a year to gather that data, and it was a year well spent. Once that was done, I've never been great with heights until I started doing murals. And so now that I have to work with taller spaces, it's thankfully having scaffolding that was literally bolted into the building. It was easy. So heights and stuff for me on that element are a big deal of it. When you have letters that have to be in exact places, there's a lot of traditional muralists that probably would have gridded that. Initially, I just got a lift, and then we projected the mural. We projected it onto the building, and then I sketched it. So I had my initial letter placement, and then freehanded it from there within the letters. Hauling paint back and forth is, I don't know, like I like sketching on a building usually more than I like sketching on paper. So there's something freeing about painting that large that lets you get into the nitty gritty, because the nitty gritty is a lot bigger than a piece of paper. But I think the hardest part was probably getting to the point of actually painting the mural, which was just working with a lot of different agencies and logistics with the construction company.
Awesome. Does anybody have any other questions for Patrick? We still have some time here, so if, please feel free to ask questions if you want to know anything else about his work or his procedures.
I will say this. Originally, when I got into murals, it was a lot about what I wanted to do and what I wanted to showcase as far as branding. And that has changed for me, where now, before I put something up into the public space, I am concerned about what the public is not necessarily looking for, but what is good for that particular public space. And I think if you're interested in doing mural work, you should definitely consider who lives within the space, who travels within that space, have conversations with community members or community leaders to have a better understanding. I think it's very easy to have a colonialist outlook on doing large pieces in public spaces. And I feel that I did that early on, and I attempt to not do that now.
Patrick, there's a few more questions. Can you tell us anything about your current plans for future work?
So my future work right now, I am doing a comic series, so that's taking up a lot of my time. Part series, and currently I just published book 2. So if you're interested in seeing a comic by me, you can get it at Fanfare. or on my website at gobonusaves.com. As far as murals go, it just depends. In the past month, I did work for a new restaurant on Porter's Road called Turbo Chicken, which was a lot of fun. I got to design some cool characters and do some work for that. And I also did a large botanical mural. Murals are weird. Sometimes I'll have like a year's time in advance, and then sometimes they'll be like, I'm looking to get this done in like 6 weeks. A really cool project that's happening around I want to say, I don't have a calendar right in front of me. I think it's the 19th. It's like next Saturday. I'm going to be doing a mural over in the Vine neighborhood. Sorry, my screen just went dark over here. Sorry, guys. Okay. I apologize. I have some screen issues there. We'll be working with different family units for about like an hour-ish at a time. And it's going to be a welcome to the Vine mural. So if you're coming down Westnedge, going from north to south, it's going to be on the corner of Vine and Westnedge. It's going to be like a 12 by 4 foot or 12 by 8 foot mural that's going to be right next to another mural that's right over there on Westnedge and Vine. So that's also been a big help by the Arts Council to get that project going through their grant process. And working with the Vine Neighborhood Association is always something I enjoy, and I'm excited to rock that out with some people in the next week or so.
Are you still able to see the questions here?
Yeah, I'm just going back to the chat here.
Okay.
Do you submit any of your works to be Pokestops and Pokemon Go, or is it all other people? No, you know what? So I'm gonna totally be a nerd here. I'm a Pokemon Go player, and I have not submitted one stop, and it's been people that have done it. It's always cool to see somebody message me and be like, "Oh my gosh, I knew stops here." So the simple pleasures of having Pokestops as murals. I love it. It's cool.
It's very cool.
And then how do you go about finding places to practice painting murals? So this is a tough one, but I want to throw out a couple of options. So, for larger cities, there's usually places where people just go and practice. And there's also the real graffiti or street art element of it, doing whatever you want. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. I do not do that anymore. I normally go and practice at the Washington Street Bridge. It's in Battle Creek. It's a little farther than Kalamazoo, but I mean, it's a safe place to practice, and it's going on, I want to say, it's between like 20 and 30 years that place has been used as a practice space. And just people can paint, and it's fine. If you're in Kalamazoo and you want to practice paint, I would see if you have a place where you can set up some 4x8 panels of wood. Prime it and practice. Have your own practice space. An 8x8 foot it's a small section, but a decent enough section to try some stuff out. Also, I think that Parks and Rec has been in talks to get kind of like a graffiti street art practice space around. And so if you're interested in that, get a hold of Parks and Rec and tell them that's an idea that you would like to be either a part of or know more about. Because it can happen here. I think it should. I think people should have a space to readily practice. It's hard to it's easy to practice on paper for things, but when you're trying to get like can practice out, like you need a space to do it, and it's just there's not a lot of available spaces locally unless you do it yourself.
Patrick, as far as the Washington Street Bridge in Battle Creek, is that sort of an officially sanctioned location by Battle Creek, or do they just kind of look the other way? And
So, okay, this is let me close this out real quick. When I started painting with a guy back in 2012, he had told me a story that there had been initially some talks between city officials to make it a safe place to paint. Now, I have never personally talked with anyone there about the original history of how that happened. And I'm not a Battle Creek native, so I don't know. However, I regularly, when I go down there, police officers and other people just come through and hang out and watch you paint or talk. So it's always been like a safe spot to paint at where I've never had any issues. So
very
I'm not fully sure of the background there, but I know that it seems to be, fine.
good.
Okay, how do you know if, oh, wait a minute, I'm gonna go back here. Have you ever been to any graffiti museums? Any you'd recommend or would like to see? So I was down in Miami last year for Art Basel, and they have a new graffiti museum down in, I'm forgetting right where it's at, in Wynwood. Gosh, and no, we couldn't get in because we were leaving like the day they were having the grand opening because we got there early to paint. So, and now this year, I'm not going anywhere because COVID. So, yeah, if you want to, I know there's more around, but if you ever are in Miami, there is a graffiti museum put together by some really old school graffiti artists in Wynwood. And there's another question. How do you know if certain paints are compatible with other brand primers and clear coats? So I do not use a lot of clear coats outdoors. If the closest thing to a clear coat I'll usually use is like anti-graffiti. So typically with paint, if it's an outdoor job, I'll use exterior acrylic primer or a masonry primer. Um, and once that's dry, you can put anything on top of it. So, you can put more exterior acrylic. You can put spray paint on top of it. Typically, you'll see like this Rust-Oleum comes in a satin or a flat or glossy. I don't use glossy. I don't like sheen. I use pretty much, if I'm doing exterior jobs, I use all flat paint. And then so I would say in order for your paints to match up, if you're using flat for acrylic, also use flat for your spray paint. And then typically once paint is dry, you can paint on top of it with pretty much anything. Realize that UV is a paint killer. Typically most paints will be a 15-year guarantee. But like if you have like 8+ hours a day of UV exposure, there are certain color ranges which are going to fade quicker than others. And there are UV top coats that you can do. But I would say consider how long you expect that mural to be around for, and then you should probably have that in your initial planning. And if there is an upkeep, have those cost analysis conversations with wherever that funding is coming from. I hope that answered that question. There's another one. Can you say more about not being colonial and what you do? So I feel like a lot of my work early on is more of a branding element, to where it was more about like my characters and things that I was interested in. And so, whenever it's just about you, and this is just my opinion, you can do with it what you want. But whenever it's just about like your design or what you're doing, and you're just coming in someplace, like I would go to Detroit a lot and do pieces. And I feel like that in retrospect. You know, I wasn't being considerate of or of the neighborhood that I was doing things in. One of the artists I really respect, he's a guy from originally from Boston. He goes by Gaia on our Gaia Street Art on Instagram. And he, before he does murals, he comes in sometimes even a month before and just has like talks with the community and the leaders and sees what he feels properly respects the area that he is putting a piece in. I feel like the more I do public art in the spaces, the more I would prefer to be about or respecting the community that I'm working around. I feel like Howard's is probably a good example of that. Washington, the Welcome to the Washington Square mural is a good example of that. The KRVT Boardwalk Trail mural, and the Vine that I'm going to be doing fairly soon. So, and I don't think there's anything wrong with doing pieces that represent you as an artist. I just think that proper time and place is something that should be thought about before doing things. And, you know, me in 2020 was not me in 2013 as far as my train of thought. And that's just where my train of thought has developed over the years for how I look at how I do things in public spaces.
All right. We still have a few more minutes. If anybody has any last questions they want to ask Patrick, any burning questions anybody wants to know about painting? All right. Well, I want to, there's another one. Have you ever done a mural on a metal substrate?
Like a shipping container? Like, what do you mean by metal substrate? Expand.
Emily, if you want to unmute.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Okay. So yeah. So I've done a few different shipping containers. Honestly, things dry so fast on metal. It's great. Like, especially if you're going really fast with stuff. I mean, sometimes you have to, like, not that concrete is that slow for drying, but I mean, okay, let's talk about a few different surfaces. Brick versus concrete versus metal. Brick just sucks paint in. Like, you just have to keep throwing paint on it, even if it's primed. Like, it'll keep taking it. Wood, slow dryer sometimes, depending on the wood, depending on how it was primed, or depending on what kind of wood it is. Metal, man, I tell you, even if you're not in the sun, it just dries so fast. I've done a shipping container over at Water Street's corporate office, and I've done some shipping containers over in Detroit. Yeah, it's a good time. Other than and also for Art Prize, I did some historical pieces on the Blue Bridge a couple years ago. The only problem with, like, you have to get used to the ridges. So I mean, there's some obstacles. So I mean, straight lines can be, you know, there can be some taping involved and stuff like that. But no, it's fun. It's fun to paint on. It's metal. It's another surface. I mean, really, honestly, wood's probably the worst because you just have weathering can do weird things with wood, and then you have, like, so many different paints layered on stuff. It can chip weird. I don't know. It is what it is.
Awesome. Well, we've got about 5-10 more minutes here. If anybody has any more questions, please keep them coming. Otherwise, we can wrap it up and let everybody go. Looks like maybe. Oh, yep. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this with us, Patrick. This is awesome. Oh, one more question. What do you do when you feel like you have artist block? Oh man, that's a great question.
So I don't want to jinx myself here. I don't really get artist block. And let me kind of explain why. So I look at myself as an artist slash designer. A lot of the things that I do, I'm not necessarily being artistic about it. I'm designing or I'm recreating something. So for me, there's always something new to find, whether it be like history and serial or old comics or whatever. So there's always something else. And I love research. In my next life, I want to be a librarian. I just absolutely adore research. If you can put me in the local history department for a project for a few hours at a time, I am super happy. It's like Christmas.
I bet we could probably arrange that for you.
Well, it is a joy. So I feel like with artist block, if you don't have something to work on, even if you're not passionate about it, focus in on something that gives you a slight bit of interest and expand on it. And if that doesn't do it for you, stop it and try something else. I think that with drawing, early on with drawing, and I mean by early on, probably in my 20s to early 30s, a lot of the times it was about emotional connection with me. And I don't want to say that it's not now, but it's really project driven. So if I find a project that's interesting, I'm going to go down that rabbit hole and I'm going to keep searching. And then all the crazy stuff that comes just from that rabbit hole, you can have 10 rabbit holes after, and you don't even have enough time to get what you want to do done. So I never stop looking for interesting things that you might want to sketch or paint. Even if it doesn't like fully like hold your passion, that's okay. Like just explore it.
Awesome. And I think that right there is a great way to go out. Again, I want to thank you so much, Patrick. This is awesome. And once again, if you want to see more of Patrick's work, check out all the places around town that he's got work up. There's so many spots where you can see a lot of his stuff, especially down in like the Washington Square and Edison area. If you are interested in seeing more work from different people, next week we have local jewelry artist Meg Tang, who's going to be doing a tour of her jewelry studio. So please register for that. Come on back and join us next week, same time. And hopefully we'll see a lot of you then. So thanks again, Patrick. Thanks for everyone for stopping in and seeing some of his work.
Thanks so much for having me. And if you want to hit me up on Instagram, I am at GoBonusSaves, where my website is also gobonussaves.com.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, please go check out his work. It's great. And, once again, thanks to everybody for coming in and watching. And thanks again, Patrick.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.